Hi, it's Michael Lyons from Recovery Systems and Myren Fu from Higher Performance. Topic 2 for us is on training, the stimulus of training and sleep. So let's rip into it. So here's a good statement to start off with, Myren. Exercise is medicine, and what turns medicine into poison is the dose.
So pretty much when it comes to training performance, I always go by this formula. Adaptations is all about adaptations for performance, and adaptations is equivalent to the training stimulus plus recovery. And there's this thing called the recoverability factor. And what recoverability really means, it means that your recovery must supersede the training stimulus, which means the recoverability is equivalent to recovery minus the training stimulus. Yes, the training stimulus is crucial, but if you cannot recover and if your training stimulus outmatches the recovery abilities, in terms of adaptations, that won't be good for you. And a lot of people like to think that the harder I train, the more benefits I get. But as we both would like to agree that it's when you are training yourself, you're actually destroying yourself.
Yep.
It's the recovery that
Yep.
really matters.
Yep.
And that's why for higher performance, we try our very best to find the most, or rather the minimal effective dose to try and reach an outcome that the client wants or needs. But we really try and promote the recovery with the minimal effective dose.
Yeah. So I 100% agree. So some case studies. One from I spent 10 years coaching multi-sport, cycling, and also triathlon. So some observations. Some of my athletes were first-year athletes. Some of my athletes were 3, 4, and 5-year athletes. The worst thing that would happen is when we went for a swim and everyone's chit-chatting in between sets, is that one athlete would ask the other athlete, a first-year athlete would ask a fifth-year athlete, what does your training look like this week? And then he would come to me and say, well, hang on a minute, how come Freddie's doing this level of training and you've got me doing this level of training? So not all athletes are equal. And to your point, it's about your ability to recover, and not in the least of which is the engine, the cardiovascular system being built correctly, which takes time. The soft tissue resilience, which takes time, particularly if you're load bearing, like running, for example, then soft tissue strength is very important, and it does take time to accumulate that strength and that resilience. So very interesting point. So yep, we mentioned training being a stimulus. So here's a good graph that I'd like you to talk to, so that we've got we're training making you worse here. And so talk us through this graph.
Okay, so as you can see from the graph, before training, that's your homeostasis level, which means nothing's happening. You're not going to adapt from the training stimulus or whatsoever. That's your baseline. And through training, like what we mentioned, you are actually going to break yourself down, both your nervous system as well as your muscle tissues. And you notice the graph only starts to accelerate or increase towards the homeostatic level based upon your recovery strategies. And then comes the supercompensation. Again, it really depends in terms of nervous system. It may take up to 72 hours or more. It depends on what's the intensity of it. If it's going to be much more on the peripheral or the muscles, it's going to take about 48 hours to 72 hours to supercompensate. And that's why it really depends on the intensity of the exercise. The higher the intensity, the longer you need for your supercompensation. And that's where this is something that people need to understand. It isn't the more the better. You need to dose the frequency strategically.
Yep. There's a lot of key factors around recovery. So can we expect 10% improvement in a week?
I guess this really depends on how good your recovery is.
Yeah.
And again, what's your training age? I think that's a really crucial factor.
And look, maybe if somebody's a new athlete, in the first month of, say, getting off the couch and getting back into exercise, they're going to see huge gains.
Newbie gains.
Yeah, newbie gains. And then and then it's going to suck because it's going to be a journey of 1%ers, guys, and that could be 1% in a month. Now, to put things in perspective, currently we have the world cycling champs going on. So I watched the time trial the other day.
Yeah.
So the time trialists are putting out around 400 to 500 watts for their time trial effort. And guess what the difference between a gold medal and fifth place is? 5 watts.
That's crazy.
5 watts. So that's where marginal gains can really be, that's putting a relevance on what a marginal gain looks like.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Now, you touched on something brilliant that I want to talk about.
Yeah. Oh, Michael, before I forget, I think there's one thing that I want to expand upon. Well, just before we hit the advanced stages of 1% gains and marginal gains, one thing that's really, really crucial that newbies or people who just got off the couch, especially in this whole COVID period, you guys need to understand that this period where you're new is really crucial. Because this is where you make the most gains. And you don't want to waste that time. You want proper training strategies to ensure that you supersede what your body can do. Because again, I get a lot of clients that come in and then they've been training for 10 years. And then what we do in 6 months supersedes what they have done in 10 years. But from what I've looked, their performance is really not as good as someone who start off as a newbie. And as a newbie, because their training strategies are so good and well calculated, what they gain in 1 year is equivalent to someone that's been training for 10 years. So,
Very interesting thing. You could have been in the sport 10 years, but you've had 1 year's experience times 10. So the evolution also, in my view, looking at correct form with exercise, and also understanding your body mechanics and having the correct mechanics, maybe avoiding certain exercises because they're not, you're biomechanically not good at them, and maybe compensating or having an alternative that's going to be healthy is a good step forward rather than breaking yourself early.
And training volume is really, really important, and as a beginner, you guys really need to look at training volumes.
That's a tricky one, especially with social media, because it creates this thing called FOMO. If you see all your friends have been out doing stuff, and all you did was take an active rest day, which is something we'll talk about as being a good thing later. Now, you touched on the nervous system. So muscle pain, a newsflash, muscle pain is not your muscle. It's the nervous system that's resetting. Let's have a talk about rest and digest.
Okay. So rest and digest, I mean, there's so much to talk about, but one thing that helps recovery, it's really about nervous system recovery. So one thing that if you're training at high intensities, that's good to do and is usually recommended is magnesium supplements along with taurine, because it helps to calm the nervous system, right? So if the nervous system is not calm and you're always in a sympathetic mode, which means you're always in a fight or flight mode, you can pretty much forget about digesting your food well. And we all know that food is responsible, or what we call food is macronutrients, and they're responsible for ATP production as well. If you're not going to be in a parasympathetic mode where your stomach can actually digest food to use them as fuel, you pretty much can forget about recovery.
Yeah, very good point. So you touched on nutrition briefly, which is a real deep dive topic, and one that's really worthy of. We'll minus that out for now. We'll reference it, but that's a really big topic in itself. Nutrition and the timing of nutrition, and also your ability to assimilate, the ability for your gut to assimilate the nutrition are vital aspects. So very good points on the parasympathetic system. So this is what not to do, people. If you get it wrong, if the dose is wrong, if you've overdone things, if you haven't listened to your body, if you didn't take enough recovery, you will end up with body parts like that will make you look like some sort of alien. This is my left hip after arthritis because I ignored unhealthy pain. So this is what not to do. This is some of my experience personally that I took as a lesson into coaching in order to keep athletes within the boundaries of healthy. So there's my left hip. It's working very nicely. I would rather not have that though. I'd rather keep everyone else from having that also. So we're going to move on into some important topic areas. We're going to break down, the next one we're going to talk about is sleep. But actually we're going to go on in subsequent episodes to talk about tools, their frequencies, and then methods to regenerate yourself at a cellular level. So let's have a look at sleep. What do you think about this as a statement? The number one recovery modality.
I would totally agree with you because number one, because it's free. And not only is it free, but it's required every single day. It's probably the only recovery modality which you require every single day. Sleep is so important and so underrated. It's not just about getting enough sleep, it's about the timing of sleep as well. Because the timing of sleep would also means what your growth hormone production and your recovery abilities. So you can do an experiment. Pretty much you sleep for 8 hours, of which the first experiment you sleep at 3 a.m. and you wake up 8 hours later. Notice how you feel versus if you sleep at 11 p.m. and you wake up 8 hours later. You will feel entirely different, right? So that's one. And another thing that's important about sleep is the growth hormone production, which I think we'll agree upon. Growth hormone production is absolutely crucial for anti-aging, for fat loss, because fat loss is all or pretty much about growth hormone production. And that's why, just a brief one, one of the training stimulus that we give, we would actually tell people to not eat for 2 hours or even 3 hours after training. It's because we're trying to increase the growth hormone production 300% post homeostatic levels. Just let it go all the way down to baseline to 3 hours later, and then you eat, and people will actually realize that they will lose fat a lot faster.
Right.
As well.
That's a very interesting concept. So the letting the body do its own natural go through its own natural peaks post it, because the exercise has stimulated it, right?
Yeah.
So I had this, what I like about this statement is it makes everyone realize that recovery is a daily ritual. So it manifests itself in what we do around sleep, and also looking at the quality of that. We'll touch on that in a few minutes' time. But sleep and the quality of sleep is a daily dose. So how about naps? Do naps count?
Absolutely.
Yep.
I think naps are absolutely important.
Yes.
But you also need to take a look at too much of a good thing. It's not a good thing. I would think naps would be better off about 15 to 20 minutes intervals, rather than 1 full hour.
All right. Very good. So I'm going to talk about timing, or the topic of timing. I had this debate with somebody recently that said the number one, we disagreed. The number one recovery modality is time. So I partially agree with that, but I think actually we're talking about the same thing. So sleep is time well spent, particularly if you're hitting your sleep numbers. I would also say that time, for me, as an older athlete, or even some newer athletes, their training week may not be 7 days. It may be 9 days, it may be 10 days. So their training cycle is not locked into this thing we call a week. It may actually be longer, because in respect to their ability to recover at the level that they're currently at. So I think time is a very important thing. Love what you said about HGH. HGH levels are naturally at the highest just before you naturally awake. So therefore, an alarm clock prematurely waking you may be your enemy, because your body has missed out on that surge of HGH levels that would naturally occur during a rested state. So there's a little bit of a warning bell so I know a lot of multi-sport athletes are up very early, maybe 5-6 days a week. I think there's actually some healthiness about reducing that to maybe 2 or 3, and then moving some of your training to the evening, and allowing your body to recover properly before and allow your body to naturally wake. So it's not being ill-disciplined. It's not being a slacker or lazy. It's actually listening and understanding to your body and how your body works.
Yeah.
So circadian rhythms are the other thing that are quite important. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm an early bird.
I am an early bird, but I'm forced to be an early bird. So I wake up with the alarm clock.
Right, yes. And so that's a note to all the personal trainers out there that may be listening to this. You really need to respect your nap time, because you've actually missed out on that. Yeah, by profession, you've missed out on that early part. You really need to respect that nap time. And you also need to understand and use tools that will help you overcome and compensate in terms of giving you a recovery boost as well. So circadian rhythm. So I'm naturally an early bird. My wife's a night owl. So I'm firing on all cylinders early in the day. Towards the end of the day, I'm pretty much useless. So that's my natural circadian rhythm. And this is about my body will naturally release towards the end of the day a hormone that starts to slow you down and prepare for sleep.
Right.
And this is why ramping at the end of the day with coffee is not a good thing.
Yep.
Coffee has a half-life of maybe 12 hours. So you're actually going to interfere with your sleep and interfere with what is a very natural process by artificially boosting yourself. And it's not actually a good thing, because sooner or later you create a debt and that you'll need to pay. Good references for this is a book that you can buy as an Audible called Coffee, and another book called Why We Sleep.
Oh, that's such a good book.
Yeah,
Yep.
great. I've listened to those books many times. I also recently went on a coffee fast. I was super cranky for 2-3 days, and ultimately I realized how tired I naturally was, and how much more sleep, how I was tricking myself with coffee to blast on and keep on going. Now, coffee and I have a long-term relationship, and I had a little break from it. I would say I'm moderating now, and I'm trying to have my last cup of coffee before midday.
I think, Michael, you brought up a really good point, which I don't think I've ever thought about. You mentioned about the coffee fast and why that's where you really realize that's how tired you are. I think that's really good, because what I'm hearing on the gym floor and stuff like that is, I go on a coffee fast, or I can't do without coffee. When I go without coffee, I'm cranky and all that stuff, so I need my coffee. But people don't realize that, hey man, actually, if you do without coffee, that's actually how you really are.
Yeah.
And your body's not put on steroids.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So it is a big trick. I think it's a blessing and a curse, is coffee. So just be aware. Okay, so the alarm clock is your frenemy. I think we touched on that. It's your friend and enemy. So I limit my alarm clock days to 2 a week.
Right.
And that's typically because I do a long ride. I train almost every day, S&C work. Because I'm old, I need to try and maintain my strength, my muscle, and so on. And so I need to get out early to beat the traffic and the heat.
Yeah.
So I have 2 alarm clock days a week, and that's more than enough. All right, let's talk about sleep hygiene. And I'd like to use this as a form of tip. There's a lot been written about sleep. That book we referenced earlier has some really good suggestions. I'd like to share a few that have helped me over the years. The number one is it's very difficult to keep a room completely dark, because we've got things in the room, like the light on the aircon, the light on the fan, the little lights here and there. So I find that blocking all light out is a very important thing. So I wear a sleep mask. Now the one I wear, I'm not sponsored by it or anything like that. I'm wearing the Manta, and it completely blacks out the light. There's lots of others in the market that will do this. And I also have a practice of dropping a few drops of lavender on around the nose area of the mask, and that just helps with calming down as well. I was until recently sleeping on an earthing mat as well. So the earthing mat, because we are naturally exposed to EMF from aircon, from Wi-Fi, from Bluetooth, and the rest of it, earthing your body is actually a way of that passing out of your body so it doesn't interfere at a cellular level. So earthing mats can be placed under the bed sheet and are a relatively inexpensive experiment to see whether that would help you or not. So under my desk that we're sitting, I also have an earthing mat. I also have one under the keyboard. So that experiment for me was validated by sleep numbers, where I had an improvement in my sleep numbers. Not a huge jump, but marginal gains, which I think we're looking for. My current state is I sleep on a biomat. And
which we'll talk about later.
Yeah. So that's not only helping with the earthing, but it's giving me a dose of good stuff while I'm sleeping as well. So we'll get into that a little later on. Okay, so sleep hygiene. Any tips?
Yeah, for me, I'm pretty much, I guess one of the things you need to find out is what are you exactly sensitive with. I know it's really important to sleep in darkness, but I know of some people who need to sleep with the light on, or they can't sleep at all.
Yeah.
So, but that's another topic for another day. But for me, I am very sensitive to sound, so I would actually wear earplugs to sleep, because that's the only way I can get deep sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
very, very good. So I had this conversation with one of our customers who's also in the fitness industry, who's got 2 kids. And mothers sleep with one eye open and one ear open the whole time. So she laughed at me when I suggested this. I said, "Yep, I hear you. That's a mother thing."
Yep.
So definitely, and look, parents will no doubt, both parents will have one ear on what's going on with their kids as well. So there's another factor to take into account.
Oh yeah. I'm not sure if I think there's one more thing, is like try not to get your brain too stimulated. So stay away from technology, stay away from anything that makes you think too much before you sleep.
So one of my tricks in that regard is I'll listen to an Audible book.
Oh, likewise.
Yeah, and so I'll never get beyond 1 or 2 chapters, and I'm a goner. I'm gone. So this is what I'm asked on. I'll put the Audible book on a timer, so it's going to turn itself off anyway. And the other trick I have is, and this is a very difficult discipline for me, if I wake up in the middle of the night for a bio break, do not check your phone. It can wait till the morning, okay? And so the times that I've checked my phone and then started to respond to an email, and then 3 hours later I'm still wide awake. So there's a little bit of a trick. Heat and heat dissipation. So different people have, some people are heat generators.
That's me, man.
Yeah. So have you ever noticed that when you wake up, your feet are actually outside of the blankets?
Oh, yeah.
This is your body trying to regulate your heat. There are some ways that you can compensate for this. The biomat is definitely one, because you can have that below body temperature in order to draw additional heat out of your body, which is going to help with that process. Because guess what? As you are wriggling around with your feet, that's interfering with, even though it's subconscious, that's interfering with your sleep. So important factor to take into account is just managing that. So a lot of that's because when you're sleeping, you're all the repairmen are getting on with the repair job inside your body, right? So there's a lot going on, and it's manifesting itself in heat. Heat dissipation is very important, so that you're getting a sufficient level of deep sleep, REM sleep, and a relevant percentage of light sleep as well.
Right.
Newsflash. I'll get you to read this one out there, Myren.
All right. Muscle grow when we rest, not when we train.
What?
Which is pretty much what we spoke about earlier. Again, in training, it's breaking down, and people need to understand that, because in my gym, we do have people who are obsessed. They want to train 7 days a week. They want to train 2 times a day. They want to learn all kinds of skills. They want to get strong. They want to get fast. They want to train endurance at the same time. They want to be good at everything. But being good at everything just takes away from recovery. And every training stimulus that you put in your body, every single extra rep, every single extra set, additional weight that you're not supposed to do this week, will all take away from your recovery.
There's a real, this is a really big factor. So exercise intelligence and EQ are not the same thing, and IQ. You could be an incredibly bright person, but really dumb when it comes to exercise.
Oh, yeah.
So we call this exercise intelligence. Quick case study. One of my cycling mentors was a double Olympian, cycling and speed skating, ice skating. And he went to 3 Olympics in 2 years. So at a time in the early 90s when the Winter Olympics were in step, same year as the Summer Olympics, then they put them 2 years apart. So he was a very busy athlete. Now this guy had very high exercise intelligence, even without using data, too much data, even sometimes without even using a heart rate monitor, he knew exactly what was going on with his body. And so this is very rare, by the way. 99% of us do need data and do need to measure and track things. So what the story goes, he was training for the Barcelona Olympics, and he and his training partner were out. They were supposed to do a 6-hour ride. They were both so loaded up with training that they knew this was a day to actually call a rest day on themselves. Now, this is before coaches could monitor things like data off your cycle computer and Strava and all the rest of it. So they started their ride. They both knew that they were cooked. They were cooked, meaning this was just going to be beyond what they needed to do. This was a bridge too far. So they rode past the playground, looked at the swings and slides, parked their bikes there and played on the playground for 4 hours. So I call this a swings and slides day, where you actually call a rest day on yourself, or you're in the middle of a workout and you go, you know what? That was my last set. Yep. And I used to give my athletes that I was coaching a round of applause when they called this on themselves, because I knew that they were understanding and getting the fact that training is a stimulus, and they were reading what's going on in their body and then accommodating that and taking that on board. This is a very good place as a coach to see happen. Would you agree?
I totally agree. And I think there's one more thing that if I could add, there's this thing that I learned about 2 years ago. And there's this thing called the work-in, not the workout. So the work-in days are really great for people who can't stay still. But work-ins are really about like active recovery, mobility work, things that you feel like it's like 20 or 30% of your 1 rep maximum, going to end ranges, promoting blood flow. I think all this is really good for the nervous system to recover from as well. And so if you are someone who really can't just go into the swing and slide method, I think a walk-in is really great.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to cover that off in our tools topic in a little more depth. So the whole parasympathetic system is why we rest. This is the whole nervous system reset. Remember, muscle pain is the nervous system responding. Unless you rest, you will not trigger the hormonal response from your body to then start the chain reaction for repair, detoxification, muscle growth, and ultimately what we're looking for is gains. So gains may be weight loss. People that overload and have so much stress constantly in the body says, forget it, I'm not changing a thing. So that's the opposite of that, is accommodating and having the patience and trust to trust in the process. So a very important thing. Difficult for a lot of people to learn. Personally, I was a chronic overtrainer.
Most endurance athlete I know.
Guilty as charged. So that's why my hip ended up looking like I'm a cyborg. But guilty as charged, lesson learned, lesson to help others to understand. The next thing the topic I'd like to bring up for us to discuss is tracking, measuring, adjusting, and improving sleep. So I have a simple watch here. It's a Huawei watch. It gives me good, adequate, consistent data on my sleep quality, and I've tracked it for a number of years, so I know things that have made a change, like the earthing mat. First of all, was an incremental change. The biomat was a next level change for me in what it did to my sleep, and also my joint inflammation when I woke the next morning. So when I'd also say adjusting is very important. If you've had a lousy night's sleep, because the brain's been going 100 miles an hour, maybe you have work stress going on or other stress, family or whatever, remember that mental stress is also body stress.
Yeah.
So life stress equals body stress. So I'm a big believer in adjusting, maybe calling that swings and slides day on yourself.
Michael, can I just expand on that? If you guys do not know what stress does to the body, again, let me give you a case study. So I have this client who was diagnosed with major depression disorder, and she was gaining weight, although she was training 3 times a week, eating well, but her fat kept piling on and her performance dropped. And I told her, you know what, I want you out of the gym. Just stay out of the gym, like seriously. And now obviously over time, it wasn't the medications that got her better, it was other things that got her better. Her life started to sort out by itself. And when she came back without exercising for, let's say, 3 to 4 months, not only did her muscle mass maintain, her body fat dropped 2% without doing anything. That's the power of stress and what it does to the body.
Yeah, it definitely needs to be accommodated. So a couple of case studies from me. One is an ultra runner in Southeast Asia, a lady who boasted about the fact that she only needed 4 hours sleep a night, as some sort of superhuman, right? So this is not right. The body does not respond long term. So I've seen over the years, I've been here in Singapore 21 years, I've seen things go on over time where sometimes athletes like that, or athletes that train wrongly, can get away with it for a period of time. They're a very bad role model for everyone else. Yeah. But sooner or later, if you track them, one to 2 years later, their body will respond in a way that will not let them carry on that type of abuse. So that case in point, that person had an immune system breakdown because their body was not getting the right levels of recovery and for what she was asking of it, and that definitely backfired. I was not happy when that happened, by the way. But the lesson in this is that your body is not a machine. There is you need to respect and treat it lovingly, and not the least of which is making sure you maintain your sleep levels. The other disrespect that I've seen to a body is someone that does not respect the training required over time in order to do a major event. Case in point, an Ironman I coached some years ago, a foreigner living here in Singapore, moved to Singapore from the UK, lost a lot of weight because all of a sudden there's no pub culture at lunch, and started to exercise because the weather's a lot nicer, and set himself an ambition of doing an Ironman in his first year as a triathlete. So this I wouldn't recommend. I would say third year, not first year. Maybe you do Olympic distance, maybe you do a half Ironman in your first year, but you need to respect that this is a process, and you can't snap your fingers and expect your body to respond to the volume and the adaptation that takes months, not years. Example, training block for triathlons, 12 weeks, right. Not 12 minutes, not 12 days. One training block is 12 weeks, and that will prepare you for the next step. So number of training blocks required for an Ironman, probably 8 to 12 minimum. 8 to 12 of those 12-week blocks. So this guy was adamant that, he had all this mental toughness and so on. He was going to bluff his way through. And unfortunately, he's a bigger guy like me. So gravity plays a role, especially when you put your running shoes on. Gravity plays a role. And he bluffed his way through an Ironman, had a terrible race, then had an immune system breakdown, put on 10 kilos that had broke out in boils. No, this is a horrible manifestation of your body just saying enough, and then he's not been able to lose that weight. He created a stress in his body that was way beyond what his.
We should say is a metabolic damage.
Yeah, metabolic. Yeah, precisely. So athletes that are overly ambitious, I think social media has a big role to play in this. If you check out our blogs, I wrote a blog on mental health and exercise, or contributed with a video interview with a mental health professional when we talked about this phenomenon, particularly during COVID, where people are doing extreme stuff. So that's it on sleep. The next topic we're going to get onto next episode is tools. We hope to see you join us then.